"Keep going," they whispered, overlapping but familiar. Davis, his lost crewmate, his sister, a dozen others weaving together in a chorus that somehow didn't frighten him as much as it should. Each one was gentle, coaxing, a lifeline in the crushing dark. Mason's steps faltered, then pressed on, boots echoing in the narrow passage. The air felt thicker, damp, carrying a faint metallic tang. Shadows bent strangely along the walls, edges warping as if the ship itself leaned closer to watch him. "You're close," Davis's voice breathed, warm in his ear. "Just a little farther. We're waiting." Mason's chest tightened with a wild, fragile hope. Maybe he hadn't lost everything. Maybe they weren't all dead. He didn't notice the wet sheen glistening on the deck until his boot slid across it, sending him stumbling forward. His hand shot out, slapping against the wall, warm, soft, almost yielding under his palm. And in the silence that followed, the wall itself whispered his name. The wall's whisper clung to his ear, his own name sliding through the metal in a voice so intimate it felt like it came from inside his head. Mason jerked his hand back, breath ragged, but the voices didn't stop. They grew clearer, more distinct. "Almost there," Davis coaxed, warm and patient, the way he'd sounded during late nights on watch when Mason thought he'd fall asleep on duty. "You've done so well, just one more step." Mason's boots squelched through the slick sheen on the deck, each stride sticking slightly as if the ship wanted to hold him. The air grew warmer, damp enough to bead sweat along his forehead inside the helmet. His torchlight stuttered, beam breaking in the thick dark. Shapes stirred ahead, not movement, more like the suggestion of it, shadows bending at impossible angles just out of reach. The voices swelled, layering together into a chorus that pulled at his chest with painful hope. Then he saw it. The corridor widened into a hollow chamber, its walls slick with black fluid that pulsed faintly, as if veins ran beneath the surface. In the center lay a figure slumped against the bulkhead, helmet shattered, suit torn, but unmistakably human. "Davis," Mason whispered, throat tightening. The figure stirred, head rolling weakly toward him. When it spoke, the voice was Davis's, broken and raw. "You found me, Mason." Tears stung his eyes. He dropped to his knees, torch clattering against the deck. "I knew it. I knew you were still here. The figure lifted a trembling hand, reaching toward him, but as it moved, the torchlight caught on its skin, glistening black, rippling like liquid over bone. The helmet split wider, not in a crack, but in a slow, deliberate peel. And the voice, still Davis's, shifted mid-syllable, layering with another tone, then another, until the word Mason came out in all their voices at once. Mason froze, horror clawing up his throat. The thing smiled with Davis's face, stretched too wide, the fluid on its skin trembling as if eager to leap. It whispered again, closer now, though its lips never moved. "Stay." Mason's pulse hammered, blood roaring in his ears. The thing wearing Davis's face leaned closer, its blackened skin rippling as though something beneath it wanted out. He scrambled backward, boots slipping in the slick sheen on the floor. No, you're not him," he gasped, voice cracking. "You're not—" The creature tilted its head, smile frozen, and echoed him perfectly. "You're not him." The chorus of voices inside it layered the phrase into something inhuman. Words stretched too wide, too wrong. Mason's hands shook as he fumbled for his sidearm. The moment his fingers brushed the grip, the creature's tone shifted, softening into a sob. "Don't leave me," it begged, and the voice was his sister's, weak, dying, exactly as it had been the night she slipped away. Mason's vision blurred. He staggered to his feet, torn between the instinct to flee and the crushing guilt clawing into his chest. He raised the weapon with trembling hands, aiming square at Davis's ruined visor. The thing didn't move. It just watched him with too many eyes hidden beneath the dark, whispering, voices that belonged to everyone he'd ever lost. Mason screamed. A sound ripped raw from his throat and fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The creature's face split open, not in blood, but in a shuddering spray of black fluid that hissed against the deck. The chamber itself groaned, the walls shivering as if the ship had felt the pain. Mason staggered backward, his torch flickering wildly, light bouncing over writhing shadows, and then Silence. He was alone again, alone in the dark, with the hiss of his own breath and the echo of voices that hadn't truly left. Meanwhile, miles of corridor away, Elara and Rourke trudged in brittle silence. Their torches cast narrow cones of light across warped bulkheads, every drip of fluid making Elara flinch. Rourke moved like a machine, jaw tight, rifle steady, refusing to acknowledge the weight between them. Finally, Elara broke. "You didn't even look back for him," she said, her voice low but sharp. Rourke's stride didn't falter. "If you'd stopped, you'd be dead too. He's gone. End of story." But Elara saw the twitch at his temple, the way his shoulders tightened. He was lying, not just to her, but to himself. And in the silence that followed, she wondered who would break first. Mason pressed deeper into the dark, gun trembling in his hands, every breath loud inside his helmet. The silence pressed in close, but the voices hadn't left. They whispered softer now, threading through the air like the faint buzz of electricity, never quite gone. He stopped when the deck groaned underfoot, the same metallic wrenching he'd heard before, but this time it carried a hollow resonance that rippled down the passage. The sound vibrated in his ribs, in his teeth, as though the ship itself was humming through him. For a moment, he thought he heard footsteps just ahead. Far across the vessel, Elara froze mid-step. The echo reached her too, metallic and distant, rolling down the warped corridor like a signal. Her torchlight jittered against the walls, catching rivulets of black fluid trailing downward as if gravity itself had bent wrong. Rourke raised his rifle instantly, the beam fixed steady down the hall. "You hear that?" he muttered, though his voice carried the tightness of someone who already knew the answer. Elara swallowed hard. It sounded like... She trailed off, not wanting to admit what it sounded like. Not just footsteps, familiar ones. Rourke shot her a sharp look. "Don't. It's the ship playing tricks." But she kept staring into the dark, heart pounding, a sick thought curling through her mind. What if Mason was still close enough to hear them too? Mason slowed his pace, knuckles white on the grip of his pistol. The footsteps ahead faded, but another sound rose in their place, a faint dragging scrape, like something heavy being pulled across metal. His throat tightened. He wanted to turn back, to find Elara, to tell her he wasn't gone. But the voices swelled again, insistent, pulling him deeper. He took another step forward, and the dark shifted, as though something in it had been waiting for him all along. Mason's breath fogged the inside of his visor, vision blurring with every panicked exhale. He crept forward, each step sticking against the slick deck, pistol trembling in his hands. The scraping sound came again, louder now, just ahead. A weight dragged slowly over metal. His torch beam flickered across the chamber, catching glimpses of things that shouldn't be there. A smear of black fluid across the wall. A helmet half sunk into the deck, as though it had been absorbed. Shapes hunched in the shadows, still as statues, but too uneven to be machinery. Then, movement. One of the shapes shifted, rising slowly from the wall. It peeled itself free with a wet sound, the bulkhead stretching around it like skin snapping back into place. The thing straightened, towering over him, its form half human, half something grown out of the ship itself. The voices surged, not coaxing this time, but commanding, layered so deep they rattled in his bones. "Come closer." Mason staggered back, torch shaking, beam flashing across its face. For a heartbeat, he saw Davis again, his features rippling across the black surface, eyes wide with pain. Then the face split, stretching open into a vertical maw lined with teeth that dripped fluid onto the deck. Mason fired without thinking. One shot, two, three. The gunshots cracked like lightning in the chamber, each muzzle flash freezing the thing's shifting face in strobing horror. But when the smoke cleared, the creature was still there, black liquid seething where the bullets had struck. It leaned forward, its teeth chattering together in a grotesque imitation of speech. "Mason," it hissed in his own voice. The gun slipped from his fingers. Elara's boots scraped over the warped deck, her torch beam jittering with every tremor in her hands. She couldn't shake the sound that had echoed through the corridor moments ago. Like footsteps, but heavier, dragging. Too much like Mason's stride to ignore. Rourke marched ahead, rifle fixed steady, refusing to look back at her. His voice was iron, clipped. "Don't fall behind. Whatever you think you heard, it wasn't him." Elara's jaw clenched. "You don't know that." Rourke stopped abruptly, shoulders taut, then turned. The beam of his helmet lamp caught her square in the eyes. "You think he's alive out there, in this?" He swept a hand toward the dripping walls, the slick deck, the pulsing shadows that seemed to breathe with them. "If he is, then he's already gone. And if you start chasing phantoms, you'll follow him straight into the dark." Elara wanted to argue, but the words caught, because part of her, the part the ship gnawed at, wasn't sure if Mason's fate was worse than death. The silence stretched between them, heavier than the darkness around them. Then the deck groaned under their feet, long and low, as though the ship itself had leaned closer to listen. Both torches swung upward. Black fluid bled from the ceiling seam in a slow, deliberate drip, splattering onto the floor between them. It spread outward in slick tendrils, curling like fingers reaching for their boots. Rourke cursed under his breath, yanking her back. "Move, now!" And as they staggered into the next corridor, the walls behind them seemed to sigh in disappointment. The corridor bent downward at a subtle incline, the deck plates slick beneath their boots. Elara's beam caught glimpses of rusted panels and shattered piping. But the further they went, the less the place looked like machinery and more like bone. The walls curved with unnatural symmetry, rib-like arches pressing inward. Rourke noticed it too. He slowed, his lamp cutting across the narrowing passage. "This ship wasn't built like this," he muttered. "Someone, or something, reshaped it." Elara swallowed against the rising lump in her throat. Or it grew. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Then a sound broke it. Drip, 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 steady, close. She swung her torch down and froze. The black fluid pooled thick between the deck plates, bubbling faintly, and each bubble carried with it a whisper. Not words this time, but a cadence, a rhythm too precise to be random, a heartbeat. Elara stumbled back, nearly colliding with Rourke. He caught her arm hard. "Don't look at it," he said. But his own eyes had widened, reflecting the pale glow of his torch. The heartbeat quickened. The fluid shivered and began to spread outward across the floor, thin tendrils snaking toward their boots. "Go," Rourke snapped, dragging her forward. They splashed through the pooling muck, boots sticking with every step, the whispers chasing after them as if the liquid itself wanted to follow. Elara's pulse hammered in her ears, but she forced herself not to scream, because screaming felt like exactly what the ship wanted. They burst into a wider chamber, both of them panting, soaked in sweat despite the cold. For a moment, it was still. But then, from the far corner, something shifted. A helmet, crushed, familiar. Elara froze, breath catching in her throat. "That's—" Rourke's hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Don't, it's not real." But she couldn't stop staring, because she knew that helmet. Mason's. Elara tore her gaze from Rourke's hand on her shoulder back to the crushed helmet lying in the dark. The edges were warped, visor spider-webbed with fractures, a thin sheen of black fluid glistening across its surface. Her chest tightened. She could almost see Mason's face behind it, pale and still, just as she'd seen him once on the med bay cot when he'd nearly bled out from a training accident years ago. The memory rushed back so vividly it drowned out the stink of the corridor. "Elara," Rourke growled, tightening his grip. "Don't move." But her boots were already sliding forward, one step then another. Her torch beam wavered, spilling across the helmet. A whisper slithered up from the dark, faint but unmistakable. "Elara, help me." Her throat clenched. "Mason," she whispered back before she could stop herself. The black fluid around the helmet quivered like it had heard her. Then it pulsed, once, as though a heart had beaten beneath it. Rourke yanked her back hard. "It's bait." His voice cracked, more panic than anger. The helmet twitched. No, moved, dragged an inch closer across the floor by the tendrils of black fluid that had begun to spread out beneath it. They curled like worms, reaching toward her boots. The whisper grew louder, richer, echoing inside her skull. "Don't let me die here, Elara, please." Her chest heaved. hands shaking violently as she raised her torch higher. For an instant, she almost lunged for it, almost believed. But then the visor split. Not cracked further, not broke, it peeled open, slowly, like lips parting into a grin. Inside, there was no face, just rows of tiny, needle-like teeth. Elara's scream tore through the corridor. Rourke fired. The helmet exploded into black spray, splattering the walls and sizzling where it landed. The thing hissed, not in pain, but in fury, and the corridor around them groaned, walls tightening like ribs closing around a heart. Rourke shoved her forward, voice hoarse, "Run, now!" Mason's pistol clattered against the deck, useless. The thing loomed over him, its stretched mouth dripping black fluid in long strings that hissed when they touched metal. It leaned close, whispering with his own voice. "Mason." The sound rolled through him, echoing in his chest like he was hearing himself from inside out. His knees buckled. He forced himself backward, palms scraping against the deck until his shoulders hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. The creature's shape rippled, bones and flesh bending like melted wax. One moment it looked like Davis again, visor cracked and empty. The next it was Elara, her face slack and pale, eyes clouded with death. Mason choked on his breath. "You're not real," he said hoarsely. "You're not—" The thing cut him off with a sudden sharp snap of its jaws, teeth clattering together inches from his visor. The sound was wrong, too crisp, too clean, like steel slamming against steel. He flinched, heart slamming against his ribs when the floor beneath him vibrated. The ship itself was pulsing in time with the creature, like they were one body, one system. He could feel it in his bones, every drip, every breath, every groan of the walls. The thing leaned closer, fluid dripping from its teeth onto his chest plate, sizzling faintly. Its many voices hissed together, layered into one phrase. "You can't run from yourself." Mason squeezed his eyes shut, desperation surging. His hands scrambled blindly across the deck. Anything, any weapon, any tool, until his fingers brushed cold metal. A loose length of pipe. He wrapped both hands around it, adrenaline shoving the terror aside for a split second, and swung. The pipe cracked against the creature's skull with a hollow, ringing clang. Black fluid burst outward, splattering across his visor, stinging his eyes. The thing recoiled, not in pain but in rage. The chamber shuddered violently, lights flickering, metal groaning like a storm was ripping through the ship. Mason staggered to his feet, blind and half choking on the stench, but alive. He bolted into the dark corridor beyond, leaving the monster shrieking behind him. Elara's scream still rang in her ears as Rourke dragged her forward, his grip iron around her arm. The corridor behind them convulsed, plates grinding together as if the walls wanted to seal them in. "Don't stop," Rourke barked, shoving her ahead. His rifle dangled at his side, the barrel dripping with black residue from the helmet thing he'd destroyed. Elara stumbled but kept moving, lungs burning, the ship's heartbeat still echoing in her skull. Every shadow stretched too far, every drip seemed to whisper her name. Mason's name. The corridor opened into a junction, 3 paths branching into deeper dark. Rourke halted, chest heaving, eyes flicking rapidly between them. For once, he didn't look like he had a plan. Elara pressed her palms to her helmet, trying to steady her breath. "We can't keep running blind." "Better blind than dead," Rourke snapped. His voice was raw, stripped of command. "Pick one and move." The deck beneath them shuddered again, a low vibration traveling up through their boots, rattling their bones. From one of the side corridors, fluid began to seep forward, a glistening tide crawling toward them. Elara's torch beam caught it spreading fast, too fast, tendrils reaching like hungry fingers. She froze. "It's herding us." Rourke cursed under his breath, turning them toward the only path still dry. He shoved her forward, but the way ahead seemed narrower, darker, the walls slick as if already wet with breath. And then, clang, a sound cracked through the corridor, distant but sharp. Gunfire. Elara's heart leapt. She knew that rhythm, Mason's weapon. She spun toward Rourke, voice breaking with desperate hope. "That's him. He's alive." Rourke's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it, but the way his hand hovered near his weapon, the way his eyes flicked toward the advancing tide, told her he didn't believe survival and salvation were the same thing anymore. The black tide slithered faster now, filling the junction behind them with a wet, sucking sound that made Elara's skin crawl. She could almost feel it breathing, each pulse pushing the muck closer. Rourke shoved her toward the narrow passage. "That way, move." Elara hesitated. The path ahead looked wrong. The walls were slick, tapering inward like a throat. The air was damp, heavy, carrying a faint sour stench that burned her nostrils. "It's hurting us," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not a corridor. It's a trap." Rourke turned on her, eyes wide, sweat streaking his face inside the visor. "And what's your plan? Stay here and drown in that?" He jabbed a finger back at the tide, which was already pooling across the deck, tendrils branching toward their boots. Elara's torch beam wavered, catching the sheen of the fluid, spreading wider, faster, almost alive with hunger. Rourke gritted his teeth, voice raw. "Decide now, Elara. Death on your feet or in that sludge." Her heart hammered, throat dry. She wanted to argue, wanted to claw at the walls, but there was no time. The tide surged forward with a wet slap, spraying droplets that sizzled when they hit metal. She bolted into the narrow passage, Rourke right behind her. The walls seemed to close tighter with every step, pressing them together, forcing their shoulders to scrape the slick surface. The air stank of rot. Something shifted beneath their boots, soft, spongy, not metal at all. Elara's stomach turned. "This isn't a corridor," she gasped. Rourke's breath was ragged in her ear. "Then what the hell is it?" The walls vibrated in answer, a deep guttural groan that echoed like the throat of a giant thing swallowing them whole. Mason stumbled down the corridor, his vision blurred with stinging black fluid smeared across the inside of his visor. He dragged a sleeve over it, smearing more than clearing, leaving him half blind in the dark. Every drip and groan of the ship seemed magnified now, rattling straight through his skull. His chest heaved, his lungs burned. But he didn't dare stop. The pipe he'd swung was still clenched white-knuckled in his grip, the only thing between him and that thing's teeth. His hands trembled around it, the metal slick with sweat and residue. He turned a corner and collapsed against the wall, helmet clanging softly against the steel, or what should have been steel. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly under his gloves, as though the wall itself had veins. He yanked his hand back in disgust, heart pounding harder. The question pressed in, had he escaped, or had it let him go? The thought burrowed deeper the longer he crouched there. That thing hadn't chased him. It could have torn him apart, but it hadn't. It wanted him to run. It wanted him to lead it somewhere. His breathing quickened, visor fogging. He tore his helmet off, ignoring the foul stench that rushed in. The air was sour, metallic, tinged with something like rot. It scraped his throat raw, but the need for oxygen drowned out the risk. He pressed his forehead against the cold edge of the pipe, fighting to steady his nerves. For a fleeting moment, he thought he heard boots echoing further down the corridor. Familiar. Hopeful. "Elara?" he croaked, voice hoarse. But the sound that answered wasn't boots. It was whispering, his own voice, drifting from the dark. "Mason, this way." His stomach lurched. He forced himself upright, every muscle trembling. He gripped the pipe tighter, teeth clenched, eyes locked on the shifting dark ahead. If the ship wanted to lead him somewhere, then fine. He'd follow. But not as prey, not yet. The walls pressed tighter with every step, slick and shuddering, as though they were breathing in time with the crew's ragged gasps. Elara's shoulder scraped raw against the surface, and her torch beam stuttered across walls that weren't steel at all. They were ridged, soft, and flexed like muscle. Rourke grunted behind her, his rifle catching against the narrowing space. "Keep moving," he barked, but there was strain in his voice now, the panic breaking through. Elara tried to press forward, but her boots sank into the deck, which gave beneath her weight like wet sponge. She yanked her foot free with a sickening squelch, a thin film of black clinging to her boot as though it wanted to hold her. Her chest tightened. Air grew thick, damp, burning her throat with each inhale. She ripped at her helmet seals, desperate for cleaner air, then froze when she realized there wasn't any. The atmosphere here was part of the ship, sour and living, feeding them poison with every breath. Her vision blurred. She staggered. Ilara! Rourke's hand clamped down on her arm, dragging her forward. His voice was hoarse, angry, but his grip was desperate. "Don't you quit on me now." The walls trembled around them, and a deep, gurgling moan rolled through the passage. For an instant, Ilara swore she felt the vibrations inside her chest, as if the ship's pulse had synced with her own heartbeat. Something slick brushed her ankle. She kicked, torch beam flaring downward just in time to catch a tendril curling back into the fleshy deck. Her scream tore out of her throat before she could stop it. The passage narrowed again. Ahead, it twisted into a black throat that pulsed wetly, promising no return. Rourke cursed under his breath. This isn't a corridor. It's swallowing us. The air was almost unbreathable now. Ilara's lungs clawed for oxygen, each gasp burning hotter, heavier, as if she were inhaling wet ash. Her helmet felt like a coffin clamped around her skull, her own breaths bouncing back louder and louder. Rourke slammed his shoulder into the walls, trying to carve space. The fleshy surface flexed, but gave no ground, its slick ridges pulsing against him like muscle resisting an intruder. "Ilara, focus on me." His voice cracked through the comms, sharp but fraying. "Don't listen to it." She barely heard him. Whispers slithered through the damp air, curling beneath her skull. Voices she knew, her brother's, Mason's, her own, layered until they blended into a single hungry hiss. "Stop fighting. Just breathe. It's easier if you stop." Ilara's knees buckled. Her boots sank again into the yielding deck. The tendrils licked higher, snaring her calves. Rourke bellowed, rage punching through fear. "Not like this." He jammed the butt of his rifle into the wall, tearing loose a slick strand of fibrous tissue. Black fluid sprayed out, hissing across his visor, the ship shuddering in pain. The tunnel convulsed, walls rippling inward, and for a heartbeat it felt like they were being gulped. Ilara was flung forward, slammed chest first into Rourke as he dragged her bodily through the tightening passage. "Breathe later," he snarled. "Move now." They half stumbled, half crawled as the tunnel squeezed tighter around them, the moan of the ship rolling like thunder. For one dizzy second, Ilara thought the air had gone completely. Her vision darkened, her chest screamed for release. Then, sudden emptiness. They burst into open corridor, sprawling against cold metal. Ilara ripped her helmet free, coughing, sucking in stale but breathable air. Rourke collapsed beside her, visor cracked, rifle slick with black ooze. Behind them, the passage sealed with a wet clap, like lips closing over prey that had slipped away. Ilara stared at it, chest heaving. It tried to eat us. Rourke spat dark fluid onto the deck, his voice flat, hollow. "Don't say tried." Mason staggered forward, each step heavier than the last. His pipe scraped along the wall, a dragging sound that steadied him more than his legs could. The corridor twisted in unnatural ways, straight at first, then bending subtly, like it wanted him to lose track of direction. The whispering followed. At first it had been soft, a trickle in his mind, but now it rolled stronger, voices stacking one over another until he could barely hear his own ragged breathing. "Mason, you're close now." He spun, pipe raised, but the corridor behind him was empty. Just the wet echo of his boots. A light flickered ahead, warm, golden, not the cold fluorescence of the ship. His chest hitched. He knew that glow. It was his father's work lamp, the one that had hung above the bench back home. He hadn't seen that light in years. He stumbled faster, chasing it. The stink of rot and metal peeled away for just a moment, replaced by the sharp tang of motor oil and the faint comfort of sawdust. "Mason," a voice called. His mother's, steady, warm. "Come sit, you've worked enough." He slowed, pipe trembling in his hand, his eyes stung, though from tears or the acrid air he couldn't tell. The light seemed so close now, spilling across the deck like an open doorway. But as he reached for it, the walls on either side pulsed, shuddering with wet hunger. Black veins crept across the glow, staining it darker and darker, until the golden lamp was nothing but a smear of shadow. The whispers shifted, twisting sharp. Closer, closer. Mason dropped to his knees, clutching his head, the pipe clattering beside him. His own voice hissed from the dark, mocking him. "You'll lead us right to them." Mason crawled forward on hands and knees, nails scraping against the damp deck. The whispers were inside him now, filling his skull until he couldn't tell where thought ended and voice began. "You'll lead them here. That's your purpose. You survived for us." He tried to shut it out, pressing his palms to his ears, but the sound only grew louder, vibrating through his bones. His eyes snagged on something glinting in the dark. His pipe. He dropped it. He snatched it back, clutching it like it was the only real thing left. The cold metal steadied him, reminded him that his hands were his own. But then he saw them. Elara and Rourke, standing at the far end of the corridor, helmets gone, their faces pale and open. Relief surged so fast it stole his breath. He lurched to his feet, stumbling toward them. "Elara, Rourke, it's me." They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there side by side, staring. The whispers slithered sweetly. "See? You found them. Bring us closer." Mason blinked hard, and their faces melted. Where Elara's eyes had been, there was only black liquid dripping down her cheeks. Rourke's mouth split wider, jaw unhinging, until it gaped like a wound. Both of them shivered, twitching, their bodies flickering like a bad signal. "No," Mason rasped, backing away. He swung the pipe wildly. "You're not real." The figures stepped forward anyway, feet making no sound on the deck. Their bodies flickered again, stretching taller, thinner, faces leaking away into shadow. Mason's chest locked tight. His throat burned. He wanted to scream, to charge, to collapse all at once. Instead, he slammed the pipe against the wall until sparks burst, the sound echoing down the corridor like gunfire. "Stay away," he bellowed, his voice cracked, raw. The figures vanished. Only empty dark remained. Mason stood trembling, pipe raised, tears streaking his face. He was alone again, alone with the whispers. Closer they crooned. "Just a little further. Lead us." Mason pressed his back to the wall, sliding down until he was crouched in the half-dark. The corridor stretched endlessly both ways, pulsing faintly like the belly of some beast. He pressed the pipe against his chest, clutching it so tightly the edges bit into his palms. The whispers hadn't stopped. They'd softened, weaving into his thoughts, indistinguishable from his own voice. He found himself mouthing the words as they came, his lips moving without his command. "Lead them, Mason. Bring them closer. That's what you're for." He shut his eyes, but that was worse. Shapes bloomed behind his eyelids. Elara smiling, then rotting, Rourke's hand reaching out, then splitting into black tendrils. His father at the workbench, turning slowly to reveal an eyeless face. Mason gagged, bile burning up his throat. He spat onto the deck, but the spit was black, thick. His stomach lurched. He wiped his mouth with a trembling hand, staring at the smear on his glove. "No," he rasped. "No, no, no." A skittering sound echoed ahead, not whispering this time, movement, real. Mason froze, pipe raised. The whispers hushed instantly, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Something shifted in the dark, just out of sight. A scrape, a shuffle, the sound of weight dragging. His pulse hammered in his ears. For the first time, Mason wasn't sure which was worse, if it was another hallucination or if it was real. Either way, his grip on the pipe tightened. "If you want me," he growled hoarsely, "come and get me." Elara lay sprawled on the cold deck, lungs burning, the taste of bile still in her mouth. Her helmet hung loose in her hands, and she couldn't bring herself to put it back on, not with the memory of that air choking her alive. Rourke sat slumped against the opposite wall, visor cracked, rifle slick with whatever passed for the ship's blood. His chest heaved in shallow bursts, each breath rasping like sandpaper. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was almost worse than the suffocating whispers. Finally, Elara broke it, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. It knew what it was doing. That passage wasn't a mistake. It wanted us inside. Rourke's jaw flexed, a muscle ticking. Wanted to digest us. He spat a thread of black fluid onto the deck, grimacing. Like we're nothing more than food. Elara hugged her knees to her chest, shivering, though the corridor was stifling. That thing, this ship, it's not just alive, it's aware, it adapts. It's watching us. Rourke slammed a fist into the wall, the sound echoing sharp in the stale air. Then we kill it. His voice cracked, threaded with desperation. We cut it open, we burn it. I don't care what it takes. You think we can? Elara snapped, her own fear boiling over into anger. It's been pulling us apart piece by piece since we stepped on board. Mason, Torres, Cade. Her voice faltered at the last name. It wants us broken. And it's working. Rourke glared at her, breathing hard, as if the fight between them was the only thing keeping him upright. Then what? We just curl up and wait to be eaten? Elara met his gaze, the corridor pulsing faintly around them like a living drum. Her voice was quieter now, but sharper. No, we outthink it. We stop giving it what it wants. The silence after was heavy, filled only by their uneven breaths and the slow throb of the walls. Neither believed fully in the words, but both clung to them because there was nothing else left. Rourke opened his mouth to answer, but the walls beat him to it. The corridor shuddered, a low vibration rolling beneath their bodies like the growl of some buried animal. Elara froze. The deck beneath her boots flexed, just barely, enough that she felt her stomach drop. Then the metal buckled. A jagged seam tore open in the floor at their feet, splitting wide to reveal a slick pit beneath, lined with twitching strands that reached upward like fingers. The stench hit them at once, rancid and chemical, burning their throats. Rourke cursed and yanked Elara back as the first tendrils lashed upward, coiling around the edge of the deck where she'd been sitting only seconds before. The strands whipped blindly, searching. "Move," Rourke barked, hauling her toward the far end of the corridor, his cracked visor smeared with ooze, his voice raw with urgency. The tendrils lashed higher now, fast, snaring the air, striking sparks off the bulkhead. One grazed Elara's shoulder, leaving a smear of slime that hissed and smoked on her suit. She cried out, staggering but forcing herself forward. Behind them, the seam widened with a hungry groan. The floor wasn't just breaking apart. The ship was opening its mouth. Elara and Rourke sprinted down the corridor as the deck split wider behind them, tendrils snapping at their heels. The ship roared low, vibrating through their bones, as if furious that its prey had slipped again. Elara's shoulder burned where the slime had grazed her, each step making it throb hotter. Rourke fired a burst down into the pit, rounds sparking uselessly against wet walls. "It's not slowing," he snarled, dragging Elara toward the narrowing corridor ahead. The seam split again with a wet crack, a tendril whipping past so close it clipped the side of Rourke's helmet, leaving a smear that hissed like acid. He ripped the helmet off, tossing it aside as the ooze began to eat through the visor. "Elara, faster!" They dove as one through a narrowing gap, rolling hard across the deck as the tendrils slammed shut behind them. The sound was like a door sealing, final, hungry. The corridor ahead was mercifully still. Elara lay on her back, gasping, staring at the ceiling that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her pounding heart. It's playing with us," she whispered. Rourke didn't answer. He just stared at the sealed seam behind them, jaw locked, rifle trembling in his grip. At the same time, elsewhere in the ship, Mason gripped his pipe tighter, every muscle in his body taut. The skittering sound grew louder, closer, until it scraped the metal just beyond the next bend. His breath hitched, shallow and rapid. The whispers in his skull hushed, almost reverent. "It's coming." Mason raised the pipe, teeth bared, then let it. Elara pressed her back to the wall, clutching her scorched shoulder. The slime had burned clean through the first layer of her suit, and the skin beneath throbbed hot, raw. Rourke knelt a few feet away, reloading with shaking hands, his jaw locked so tight she thought his teeth might crack. Finally he spat, "We can't keep doing this." Elara's head snapped toward him. "You think I don't know that? You think I want this?" Her voice came sharper than she intended, ragged from panic. Rourke slammed a fresh mag into the rifle with enough force to echo. "You keep telling us to push forward, keep saying we'll find answers, but every time we follow your lead, someone dies. Mason's probably already—" He stopped himself, but the word hung heavy between them. Elara's stomach twisted. She wanted to bite back, to defend herself, but the image of Mason's pale, determined face stopped her. She lowered her eyes instead, voice thin. "You think you'd do better?" Rourke barked out a humorless laugh. "Better than being eaten alive every 10 minutes? Yeah, I think so." Elara rose to her feet, trembling, but refusing to let him tower over her. "Then go ahead, Rourke. Lead. See how far you get before the ship swallows you too." For a long beat, the two of them just stared, the corridor pulsing faintly around them, as though the ship enjoyed the spectacle. Finally, Rourke looked away, muttering, "You're going to get us both killed." Elara swallowed hard, forcing down the sting of his words. Her shoulder throbbed, her body ached. But worse than the pain was the seed of doubt now burrowed deep. Mason stood rigid, every nerve screaming. The scrape came again, deliberate, dragging across the metal deck just beyond the corner. Not fast, not hiding. Almost as if whatever it was wanted him to hear it coming. His throat worked, dry. The whispers coiled tighter, hushed now, reverent. "It's here. It's yours." Mason forced his breath slow, pipe trembling in his hands, his eyes stung with sweat. The air smelled sharp, metallic, like rust turned to liquid. Then movement. A shadow slid along the wall, stretching thin, limbs bent wrong. The shape flickered like the light itself couldn't decide what it was. Mason's pulse thundered, his voice cracked as he shouted into the dark, "Show yourself!" And it did. From the bend, a figure stumbled forward. Not a monster, a person. Helmet gone, face pale, wide-eyed. The light caught the features just enough. Familiar. "Cade?" Mason's grip loosened on the pipe, disbelief crashing through the haze of terror. Cade, or something wearing Cade's face, staggered toward him. His lips moved soundlessly, pleading, but no words came. His body twitched in sharp, broken angles, like a puppet dragged by too many strings. Mason's heart lurched, his mind screamed trap, hallucination, impossibility, but his chest ached with recognition. "You're dead," he whispered, almost to himself. "I saw—" Cade's eyes snapped up, wide and black as spilled oil. His mouth split open far too wide, the silent plea twisting into a gaping maw. Mason swung the pipe on instinct, striking with a wild, desperate scream. The impact rang out, sickening, echoing down the corridor. The figure crumpled, folding in on itself, limbs collapsing like paper. The whispers swelled in triumph. "Yes, yes, more." Mason staggered back, chest heaving, eyes locked on the broken heap at his feet. For a moment, the face flickered again. Cade, slack-jawed, blood seeping from his temple. Not a monster, not a hallucination. Mason froze. His hand shook so violently the pipe almost slipped. "What did I just do?" he whispered, voice breaking. The corridor was still except for their ragged breaths. Elara pressed her hand to her shoulder wound, jaw clenched against the throbbing pain. Rourke walked ahead a few paces, rifle raised, every muscle taut with barely restrained fury. They didn't speak at first. The argument hung between them like a shadow, heavy and unresolved. Elara finally broke the silence. "You don't have to follow me." Her voice came low, brittle. "If you think you'll survive better alone, then go." Rourke didn't look back. "And leave you to stumble blind into another trap? You'd last 5 minutes." Her temper flared, but she bit it back, hearing in his voice not just anger, but something closer to fear. She couldn't tell if it was fear for himself or for her. The corridor stretched on, narrowing until they had to walk single file. The walls were moist here, glistening with thin, slick veins that pulsed faintly under the light. Elara tried not to look too long at them, but her eyes kept drifting, hypnotized by their rhythm. "Don't touch the walls," Rourke muttered. "Feels like they're watching." She almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sob. "Everything in here is watching." They walked in silence for a while longer, the air thick with tension. Then the passage bent, and at its curve stood a door, intact, sealed, untouched by the ship's slow rot. It looked almost absurdly normal against the warped metal around it. Rourke raised a hand, halting her. His voice dropped. Why would it leave a door untouched? Elara's stomach sank. The ship never gave them anything without cost. Mason's breath came in jagged gasps, his knuckles white around the bloodied pipe. The corridor rang with the echo of the blow, fading slow, swallowed by the ship's pulse. The body lay still at his feet. He didn't dare look closer, but his eyes kept dragging back anyway, caught between horror and denial. For one terrible second, it was Cade. Skin pale, blood seeping from his temple, mouth slack with death. Then it shimmered, like heat haze bending light, and became something else. A slick, angular husk with no face, limbs bending inward, already shriveling against the deck. Mason staggered back, bile rising in his throat. No, I... His words broke apart, thin as thread. The whispers surged, greedy and triumphant. It tricked you, it saved you, it made you strong. Mason dropped the pipe with a clatter, clutching his head. Shut up! His voice cracked in the narrow space, wild, raw. Shut up, shut up! But the whispers only coiled tighter, wrapping around his shame like vines around a dying tree. He forced his eyes open again, staring at the broken heap. This time it was neither fully Cade nor fully monster. A sickening overlap, flickering, impossible. And then the worst thought crawled into his mind, cold as ice. What if he'd killed both? Mason's chest hitched, a sob escaping before he could swallow it down. Alone in the pulsing dark, with the corpse that might not be a corpse, he felt the ship lean closer, watching, waiting. The door loomed before them, perfectly intact in a ship that had been gutted, warped, and consumed. Its surface was smooth, unblemished, the handle polished like it had been installed yesterday. Elara reached out instinctively, but stopped short, her hand trembling inches away. The heat coming off the walls, the stink of rot, all seemed to pause here, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Rourke shifted, rifle steady on the door, suspicion carved into every line of his face. "It's wrong," he muttered. "Too clean. Too normal." Elara's throat tightened. Or it's a way out. Or it's bait. They stared at the door in silence. It seemed to grow heavier the longer they looked, the weight of decision pressing down on them. Finally, Rourke growled, "We're already choking in this maze. You want to wait around until it decides to swallow us again? Be my guest." He reached for the handle. Elara grabbed his arm, voice sharp. "Don't." The lights overhead flickered. For a split second, the door was gone, just slick wall, pulsing veins threading across it. Then it was back again, pristine and waiting. Both of them froze, blood running cold. "Elara," Rourke whispered, "tell me you saw that." She nodded, pale. "It wants us to open it." Mason staggered back until his shoulders hit the wall, pipe dangling in his trembling hands. The body lay sprawled on the floor, twitching once, then still. For a long moment it was Cade, the face slack in death, eyes glazed, a smear of blood darkening his temple. Mason's chest collapsed inward, air hitching in his throat. Then, like a trick of the light, it wasn't Cade at all. A husk of something angular, insectile, shriveled, its limbs bending inward like burned sticks. Mason pressed his palms to his eyes, shaking his head violently. No, you're not real. You're not." The whispers surged, almost gleeful. "You were right to strike. It fooled you. It saved you. Do it again." He slammed the pipe down against the floor with a metallic shriek. "Get out of my head." The sound bounced down the corridor, swallowed by the ship's heartbeat. When he dared look again, the corpse flickered between both forms. Cade's familiar outline, the monster's broken frame, back and forth in nauseating rhythm. He couldn't trust his eyes, couldn't trust his mind. His chest heaved, sweat soaking his collar. The worst thought dug deeper now, carving into his gut. What if he hadn't chosen wrong or right, but both? What if every blow fed the creature, even as it took his friends away? Mason dropped the pipe entirely, clattering metal echoing in the dark. He clutched at his chest, breath ragged, tears burning hot at the corners of his eyes. "I didn't mean to," he whispered, as if someone, anyone, might forgive him. But there was no one there, only the ship and its pulse and the body that refused to decide what it was. Rourke's hand hovered over the handle, knuckles tight on the rifle. Elara's breath came shallow, heart hammering so hard it ached. The corridor's pulse seemed to gather behind them, like the ship itself was leaning in to watch. "On three," Rourke muttered, though his voice betrayed the tremor underneath. Elara swallowed, nodding. "One." The overhead lights flickered again, bathing the door in a brief, sickly shimmer. For an instant it wasn't there, just wall, veined and slick. Then it returned, as pristine as ever. Two. Elara's chest clenched. She almost told him to stop, to turn back, but turning back meant walking deeper into the ship's guts with no map and no hope. Forward was the only lie left worth taking. Three. Rourke wrenched the handle down. The door gave way with shocking ease, swinging inward without so much as a groan. A gush of cold, still air swept out, brushing their faces. They both froze. On the other side was a room untouched by rot. The walls were clean, smooth. The floor gleamed faintly under the beam of Rourke's rifle. For the first time in hours, maybe longer, there was no pulsing vein, no dripping slime, no whisper pressing against their skulls. Elara's throat tightened, tears threatening. "It's normal." Rourke didn't lower his rifle. That's the problem. Mason crouched beside the body, hands shaking so badly he could barely keep them from touching it. The flicker hadn't stopped. It shifted in and out of Cade's shape, then the creature's shriveled husk, then back again. Every time he blinked, it was different. His breath came shallow, as if the air itself was running thin. He pressed his fingers against his temples, willing the world to hold steady. "Please," he whispered, "just be one or the other." But the ship didn't grant mercy. The whispers came soft, almost tender now. "You did what had to be done. Better him than you. Better him than all of them." Mason slammed his fist against the floor, knuckles cracking on metal. "Shut up! Shut up!" The lights overhead pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, too fast, too loud. He looked again. He couldn't help it. And this time it was Cade's face, slack and grey, eyes glassy with death. Mason lurched back, bile burning his throat. His stomach twisted with the thought that maybe this was how the creature fed, not just on flesh, but on trust, that every strike, every mistake made it stronger. And if he had killed Cade, then the thing already had him. Mason wiped his mouth with a shaking hand, his vision blurred with hot, angry tears. He wasn't sure anymore if he wanted to move forward or just let the ship finish what it had started. Elara crossed the threshold first, heart pounding so loud she thought it might echo in the quiet. The change was immediate. The oppressive heat of the ship vanished, replaced by a crisp stillness. No pulsing walls, no dripping shadows, just smooth metal and silence. Rourke followed, rifle sweeping corners. His boots rang sharp against the floor, the sound almost alien after hours of squelching through rot. "Feels wrong," he muttered, though his voice was hushed, as if afraid to wake something. Elara spun slowly, trying to take it in. The walls were white, sterile, gleaming faintly. A table stood at the center, bolted to the floor, its surface spotless. Along the far side, cabinets lined the wall, each shut tight. For one breathless moment, she let herself hope. "It looks untouched, like nothing ever happened here." Rourke didn't lower his weapon. His jaw worked, eyes scanning, or like it's been waiting. The door behind them shut on its own with a soft click. Both of them whirled. Elara's throat went dry. "Did you?" Rourke shook his head slowly, muscles taut. "Didn't touch it." The silence inside the room pressed in tighter now, too clean, too hollow. Elara felt the faintest tremor under her feet. Not the ship's heartbeat this time, something subtler, hidden beneath the quiet. She glanced at Rourke, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Both knew the same truth. Nothing on this ship was untouched. And if this place looked safe, then it was only because it wanted to. Elara approached the nearest cabinet, her footsteps hesitant in the eerie silence. The metal door was smooth beneath her hand, cold in a way that felt unnatural. She hesitated, glancing back at Rourke. "Careful," he warned, rifle trained on the cabinet. Elara pulled it open. Inside were rows of neatly arranged medical supplies, bandages, sealed vials, tools glinting under the pale light. For the first time since they boarded, the sight of something orderly, something useful, nearly broke her. She clutched a vial in trembling fingers, eyes burning. "Real," she whispered. "It's real." Rourke stepped closer, gaze narrowing. He touched the shelf with the edge of his rifle, as if expecting it to dissolve. But the supplies held, solid. Another cabinet creaked open under his hand. Inside lay more equipment, oxygen tanks, packs of nutrient paste, sealed water containers. His eyes flickered with something close to relief. "It's a stockpile," he muttered. "A safe house." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed. Why was this here? Who stocked it? And why was it untouched while the rest of the ship rotted alive? Elara clutched the vial tighter, forcing down a sob. "We needed this. The overhead lights pulsed once, then again, and a faint sound drifted from the farthest cabinet, like something shifting inside, slow, deliberate. Rourke froze, rifle snapping up. His voice was low, flat. "Step back." Elara's blood ran cold as the sound came again, louder this time. Something was waiting inside. Mason sat slumped against the wall, arms wrapped around his knees, the pipe lying discarded a few feet away. His eyes never left the body. It wasn't moving, it couldn't be. But in the edges of his vision, he swore he saw the chest rise, shallow, like the hint of a breath. His stomach clenched. He blinked, stared harder, and the body was perfectly still again, limp and grey. Then came a whisper, not the ship's hiss this time, a voice, familiar. "Mason." He lurched upright, blood rushing hot in his ears. "Cade?" Silence. The body didn't stir. Mason, why? His throat locked. He stumbled toward it, falling to his knees beside the corpse. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know it was you. You weren't you." His words came out broken, choking. The lips didn't move, but the whisper slithered into his mind again, threading through the static. "You left me here. You killed me and left me here." Mason grabbed the corpse by the shoulders, shaking it, desperate for clarity. For a second the head lolled, and those dead eyes seemed to fix on him. He reeled back, chest heaving, bile burning in his throat. The ship throbbed beneath him like a living heart. He couldn't tell anymore if it was Cade's ghost, the creature's trick, or madness sinking claws into his skull. All he knew was that the body wanted something from him, and he wasn't sure if giving it would save him or finish him. The rattling came again, sharper now, like claws dragging inside metal. Elara staggered back from the cabinet, her hands clutching the vial so tight the glass threatened to shatter. "Something's in there." Rourke kept the rifle leveled, jaw clenched. "On my signal. If it moves, I shoot." The cabinet door trembled once, twice, then burst open. Out tumbled a shape, small, twisted, half-curled. Elara screamed before she could stop herself, stumbling into the table. For a split second, she thought it was another of the monsters, skeletal limbs tucked tight against its body. But when it hit the floor, it wasn't moving to attack. It was writhing, weak, eyes squeezed shut against the light. A human.